we will be moving on to the third panel for today, titled From Citizen Science to Citizen Social Science, Collective Mapping of Social Needs and Community Assets. This segment will consist of a presentation, a hands-on session for the audience, and reflections and dialogue. Once again, you will have the opportunity to engage with our panelists, and you can do so by approaching the standing microphones or sending in your questions online on Poll Everywhere. To begin this segment, let us welcome Dr. Justin Lee, Senior Research Fellow and Head of the IPS Policy Lab, to the stage to give a short presentation and demonstration on mass permissionless contributions to a shared knowledge base and insights on its coherence. Justin, over to you.
Afternoon, everyone. Thanks for being here. This presentation is about, is citizens' social science possible? So the content of it will be, I'll present something, I'll show something, and then there'll be an opportunity for each table to try your hands out in, So there'll be an opportunity later to do a kind of hands-on thing where you can scan the QR code on your table, and then you can fill in, I'll give you instructions later. It's a competition, so take it seriously. And then I'll talk about the possibilities and potential of if we did this properly, right? So the hands-on is just for fun. If we did this properly, what would it look like? And then we'll have our panelists weigh in on what they think, and then we'll have you weigh in on what you think, and then we'll announce the winners. So to start with this, I figured since the conference is about collective intelligence, I took some time trying to figure out for myself what is collective intelligence. It's, when the term is used, it's typically enabled by technology, but it's a socio-technical system. So it's not just what the tech platform or what the digital platform can do, but it's also the social design, how people come together to make decisions and contribute. It's typically also mobilizes mass contribution from multiple types of participants with diverse views and vantage points. So it's not just a few. I was just having a chat about whether the dessert was good. Don said, I talked to two people. They said, that one not collective intelligence, two people. Collective intelligence has to be mass. Of course, the question is how many? How many of you Don needs to talk to before it counts as collective intelligence? That's a different question. The participants also typically can contribute some degree of freedom and independence, but because of that freedom and independence, they can abuse it. So if you look at Wikipedia, there are some examples of some good quality stuff, but also you can vandalize the page. Now, with all that, somehow you can still arrive at a kind of coherent accumulation of knowledge, even though many different types of people come together and independently and freely contribute. Somehow magic still happens. So this adds up to a kind of collective capacity that surpasses the abilities of its individual constituents. So if I had asked Dawn what dessert was good, and she told me, and her judgment was much better than the collective intelligence, then no point for collective intelligence. MIT calls this the supermind, right? The supermind must be better than your individual mind. So that's how I've made sense of collective intelligence. And then I thought, what counts? What is properly collective intelligence? So from a research point of view, I could do participatory research, and I have done it. For example, with people with disabilities, and they are part of the design and even the data collection and sense-making of it. But then that's still kind of participatory. We still invited a selected group of people to be part of it. We gave them permission. They had a scope of work and responsibilities. But then what is the collective intelligence model of that? It would mean more people. It would mean maybe we don't have to give permission. Maybe they can participate. And then the question is, if we allow that kind of level of participation, can it lead to a kind of comprehensive and robust and coherent knowledge base? So some examples of CI. Of course, there's open source software development. We have two better.sg people here. They know this better than I do. We have Wikipedia, which everybody knows. And actually, this interesting thing called crowdsourcing the constitution in Iceland and Mexico City. Now, I know very little about what this is, but if you ask me, do I want to visit Iceland and Mexico City? I would say you got me at crowdsourcing the Constitution. I will go and I'll figure out what this is. And when I talk to some of my tech friends, I know very little about tech. And they tell me this. But before I talk about this image, some time ago, my 8-year-old came back from school, and he asked me this question. What is a word that starts with the letter F and ends with the letter CK? And I think about it, and I didn't want to go there, but I don't know what your dirty minds are thinking, but the correct answer is fire truck. Now, there are a lot of people who like to sit around and fire truck the government. They say at coffee shops and they complain, right? Then my tech friend said, actually there's a better way. You can fork the government. And that's something that maybe Dominic would know better. It's about taking code. It's about building, taking code that you think you can improve, right? And you build it and develop it. And if it works better, it goes back, right? So that's actually the better image for it. There are different forks in the path. And you can take something that you think can be improved, and then policymakers or government can take it back if they think it fits in and doesn't mess around with the operating system. So don't fire truck the government, fork the government. You have citizen science, and actually citizen science is something that is easy to do in a sense, but social science is different. So I give you examples of citizen science. Its factual basis of the knowledge is less contested, right? It involves things like people are doing census of animals, collecting weather data, mapping out the stars. So the scientists don't have that capacity. They make this available for everybody to contribute to. Now, social science, then the question, is that possible? We've actually had a learning journey with Participedia. They are a crowdsourcing platform that allows people to contribute case studies and approaches of what they call democratic innovations. So if you go there, you can find things like participatory budgeting, which you heard about in the morning. So participatory budgeting would have an approach. It's a case, and then you have, PB in New York, PB here, and PB there. Those are the case studies. And actually, it's easy to collect this, right? Because it's easy to contribute things like case studies and approaches. It's relatively straightforward. But then other parts of social science is more values-laden. What counts as a social problem? That's highly contested. Is divorce a social problem that we should correct for? Some people will say yes. Some people say no, divorce is just a second chance. Why do we care whether people divorce or not? And what are the desired outcomes? And also, in social science, there are qualitative forms of analysis that deal with meanings and experiences that do not aggregate in any straightforward manner. And if you look at a lot of the applied research in this space, it is not just technical. There are normative components that you cannot escape from. Let me give you an example. If you're a social service agency and you do needs assessment or gaps analysis, you might have defined a problem, but the understanding of the problem is actually quite incomplete until you adequately define then what the ideal is. If you don't have this normative benchmark, you can't determine what the shortfall is. And so, for example, I could say people with disabilities should have viable jobs. And then we can look at our employment rates and say, this is how many percent, and we want to reach how many percent. And actually, since we've started on this, as long as they have jobs, that's a good thing. But if you change the goalpost, right, you say people with disabilities should have desirable jobs with career progression and job growth and all that, then the bar has become higher. And when the bar has become higher, then the shortfall looks much more as well. Now, this isn't a technical issue. This is a normative issue, right? What are our standards? Same thing. What counts as a good death? What counts as proper inclusion? All these are things that are not just a technical issue. They have normative aspects that you cannot escape from. So such analytic work actually is closer to applied ethics than science. We've done some work like this, but it requires a lot more engagement than merely just doing the rigorous steps of analysis. And we also typically, who can contribute to knowledge? We tend to rely on, experts in policy, experts in research, experts in practice, and then everybody else is just data. But the question is, are they not experts of their own lives? And should any group have monopoly over knowledge about social issues. So sure, we can do participatory research, which is something I've dabbled in myself. I'm just wondering, is it possible to go to the next phase of it? Can we make this open collaboration? Can we try to harness collective intelligence? So what if everyone contributes? And we ask the question, it could either be this, or it could be this. And it's, this is a joke, but I think there's a serious message behind it, right? It isn't always the fact that when you put people together, good things come out of it. Sometimes not. But we are at the phase where now technology has enabled decentralized and often permissionless collaborations. And so now we are able to do it. And so the model even has changed. It's no longer filter then publish, it's publish then filter. Anyone can go out and publish and you can find it. Anyone can post pictures about Chingay and you hashtag Chingay, you can find it all there. The centralized way of filtering what's quality has changed. Now you can just publish first. So I had intended to do a showcase, but just too troublesome to go to the laptop. So I'll tell you the seed of the idea and what we had done. When I was working on an end-of-life project to understand the end-of-life landscape, it was really participatory, right? We talked to the hospice social workers, talked to the seniors, and the end of it all, we had a report, end-of-life report, on the needs, on the gaps, potential solutions. And we sent it to an NUS professor who was a specialist in this field, and she said, oh, this is interesting, can you send this to me? So she benefited from it. This is, you can add something here, so she contributed. And then she said, oh, by the way, there's a spelling mistake. And then instead of feel embarrassed, which I did, I felt embarrassed that there was a spelling mistake because, wow, we wrote this and we didn't even check. I had also realized that the knowledge base from one person's 5-minute look had improved it. What if the rest of the sector had contributed to it? You know, what would it look like? But it's difficult stuff, lah. So can you break down something like mapping needs in a way that everyone can contribute to? This is an example. We just thought, okay, it's kind of like a table, so that's simple, right? Just put down all your needs on the left, map out all the existing services and resources, and then that's basically the second column is your resource directory, and if you plonk in everything, you actually have a story. Maybe the public needs to be aware and accept the viability of end-of-life options. Then there are all these education campaigns by Lian Foundation, but Singapore Hospice Survey shows public awareness still low. And you talk to a couple of seniors or social workers, and they say, oh, seniors don't like to talk about this stuff, right? They think it's really terrible, it's choi, don't talk to me about death. So you think maybe cultural stigma. And then we have artists in the room. We think, okay, social workers don't know how to do this well. Maybe the artists can do this better. So maybe use arts-based approach to destigmatize the consideration of your end-of-life plans. Then suddenly you have a story, right? You have a story that you can cut across, and that's a meaningful narrative. Now that's the hard part. The hard part of social science is this meaningful narrative that you piece together. And so then you arrive at some kind of sense-making like this. So it's simplified but still hard. And I figured the real worth comes from the sense-making, but sense-making is hard work. Can this really be done by the crowd? Can technology enable platforms to crowdsource information, create this kind of robust understanding that's sensible and meaningful to the people who want to use it? We tried it anyway because this was a response from somebody who did this, and this dates it because this was the time when SSAs were still known as VWOs, right? The fragmentation of knowledge is a huge problem for VWOs. It takes a lot of effort just to find out what the needs are. You start build networks, talk to different people, and then the information is not shared. It sticks with that organization. If everything comes to some centralized platform, and that's the instinct, actually, everybody thinks there should be a centralized platform, and they always think maybe government can become that centralized platform. I actually think that it should be centralized if you need it to be, but ideally community-owned and collectively managed, not by some agency, because that agency will not have the ability to necessarily pull together everything that you need to know about an issue. So our answer to the question of who should contribute is basically all can contribute. And we did this platform. You can go Google Social Collab, and we have tons of date pages nobody uses for all sorts of reasons. First, it's hard for people to go in and to populate stuff. And we had spam bots create thousands of pages and users, and then we said, okay, then we can't make it entirely open, we can't make it permissionless, so you have to have a user ID and a password, and somebody's got to give you grant you that privilege of editing the pages. So we worked around that. We said, okay, we know that the SSAs will never come and do this, so we just host networks and roundtables, and you can download the information and we'll populate the page on your behalf. And so that's what we did for a few pages. In other cases, we just had wikithons, right? We had, and whoever wanted to do, the College of Alice at Peter Tan was very nice. We didn't have to facilitate. They said, can you just give us access to our students, and they would populate pages for us, and then they give us feedback on the user interface and all that. And then sometimes an organization says, can we do this for you? And one organization, not even in an animal welfare space, we would like to populate the animal welfare page. And if you go and look at the animal welfare page, wow, it's nice and coherent, quite decent. But many other pages are very messy. So we have different types of pages. It's very bad, but to make it simpler in your mind, the social causes are all the people with the problems. The asset are all the people with the solutions. But of course, that's not how it is. The people with the problems are also assets. They have their own skills and strengths, but that's how you could simplify it in your mind, right? There are social causes, but there are also asset classes. So these are people who can bring something to the table, whether it's a tech for good community, whether it's community arts, or even the service learning officers have a network, etc. We tried a bit of locality mapping. Somebody mapped out Lengkok Bahru, but I don't feel that the wiki space is very good for locality-based mapping. There's even Ubin, and I know Drama Box is working on Ubin. What I learned from this is that it changes the nature of the knowledge, right? When something is a report, because things change quite quickly. Next week, there's a new program, there's a new ground-up group doing something, policy changes. The report is dead because it's static. Hopefully, we can do something that is, live and dynamic. And there are all these different things about it, but the lesson I learned from it was when I was writing a report, my reputation was at stake. And even if I didn't know every single thing about that topic, I would pretend that I knew it. Somehow, because that's just how it is, right? And if your agency was writing a report on something, you will not know everything about it, but you'll gloss over the stuff they're not sure about, and then you will, play up the stuff you're confident about, and then when people ask you questions that you didn't know, you just try to answer. Basically, I realized that I was guilty of being very defensive about something that I produced, because that was my work and my own reputation as a researcher or academic. But when it was collective work, that entirely changed, and that, I think, was the single most useful thing about collective ownership. Everyone owned it, which means nobody in specific owned it. So we could go to, let's say, a community and say, this was what we found at the first cut. We don't know everything clearly. Could you tell us where we got it wrong? Could you tell us what we could add? And when we had students do that exercise with us, they felt, wow, this is so freeing. We finally can be entirely honest about our ignorance, and so that was great. Now that you've done it and you have a kind of visceral feel of how it is, of course the platform's not great, it's Google Docs. The wiki platform isn't that much better either, because it's really quite technical, right? And you have to be able to find a place, even if you have something to contribute, find the right place to plonk it in. And so, having had some success and many other failures at doing this was roughly what I arrived at as a possible design for this to make it kind of productive. So the context we're starting from is for the social service agencies or nonprofits. Many of you operate based on fragmented and incomplete. I can say this because I have many friends there, right? They tell me, yeah, we operate like that. It's fragmented and it's incomplete, but we just go ahead and chug along. And actually, we kind of compete rather than collaborate with our peers quite often. And we rely on all too familiar interventions. So because SSAs mainly hire social workers and therapists and psychologists, the interventions tend to be skewed towards the kinds that you already know how to do. Whatever new problem it is, even if it's end of life, that you will try to casework or counsel or talk your way so that people will make advanced care plans. If you talk to the artists, then they have a entirely different approach. Academia and research, on the other hand, well, most academics don't care for this kind of work. They only care for work that can be published, right, Natalie? And largely, even if they do this kind of work, the work is kind of skewed towards two pockets. One is, let's understand this problem better. Let's understand why is it that our recidivism rates are so high. What are the experiences of ex-offenders? What are their families' experience? So you go really deep, and then after that you ask the academic, so what should we do about it? Then they say, he either gives you some loose allusions to guiding sensibilities, or he says, that's not my problem, right? My problem is to understand it really well, and then the policymakers' problem or non-profits' problem is to solve it. Another pocket that we invest a lot in is in the evaluation of existing solutions. And we actually have very few, focus on emerging new solutions or actually rendering them actionable. So if you think about it, we understand problems, we evaluate the hell out of the problems, and then we do the R&D work very little, right? We spend so little time in this part. And funders, on the other hand, also quite difficult job. So some funders have an outsized influence with, without full appreciation of the operating context. They say, I want this to be built here, and then you build, and then the SSAs will bend over backwards to suit you. But your job is also very hard. It's not always easy to give away money. Even if you have lots of money and you have a grant and you have a grant call and say, I want to achieve social impact, I want to catalyze collaboration, I want to do this and that. And then you receive the applications. And then the applications are basically you're stuck with choosing the least worst off sometimes, right? And you're stuck with that. Even if you have the grandest ambitions. And the thing is that not all the non-profits or social service agencies can invest in cooking a solution to the extent that it becomes strong, right? They may not have the bandwidth or the know-how, or they cannot afford the luxury of cooking something for 6 months or a year and then to have it not happen. And often, it kind of feels that large funders especially are incentivized to bet on strong organizations with good reputation, so it's safe to work with them, not necessarily bet on strong solutions, because strong solutions or interesting solutions sometimes come with risks. And then the intermediaries like us, right? Sometimes we host all collaborative networks, and sometimes the networks may focus too much on problems, not enough on actionable solutions. Sometimes it doesn't kind of lead up to some kind of coherent accumulation that adds up over time. Then, of course, the knowledge architecture is an issue, just like what you saw. It's if you want to expand participation. If I did a research project and I was participatory, I have a group of people I can manage, I can reach out to, and they can co-design the research, co-analyze it. But once you have a large group like this, then you see that it's messy. Things may not always work. The diversity is a strength, but sometimes it also poses a challenge for coherence. Sometimes we have angry caregivers come to the table and say, I don't want to talk about this, I want to do something. They say, and so everybody comes with a different agenda. How do you hold the space so that everything connects? Freedoms and permissionless systems can be abused, and of course, ultimately, community buy-in and self-organization. So whether it's a Google Doc or wiki space, right? It's not the tech affordances. The Google Doc and the wiki space, the only difference between them, both of them can allow mass participation, asynchronous mass participation, but the wiki space has the additional benefit of being discoverable. No one can discover your Google Docs, right? So that's the only difference. But ultimately, it is whether people want to come together to do this. I just met some people and said, wow, this is really great. Now I know who else is interested in disability issues, and maybe I'll connect with them, and we can continue to populate this page after the thing is done. So based on that, I figured that maybe a workaround or to solve the problem, how do we do this? Maybe we could form evidence-informed, solutions-focused networks. And I call it evidence-informed because evidence-based has a baggage. And the current term, you want to Google it, is evidence-informed, so that it's more inclusive of the types of evidence, not just the RCT types of evidence. But what if we had a network that started with solutions, because we don't look at solutions enough, in my opinion. Can we tap into collective intelligence for this, for more complete and robust knowledge base? And it's not just us, not the people in the room, right? Because you have your academics, and they can be the knowledge brokers. Can we create knowledge commons? Can we create something that we can all collectively own, and therefore nobody owns specifically? It's not a report from IPS or LKYCIC. But not just that it facilitates others to contribute to that. Can we shift gears to solutioning, and can we broker, not just encourage productive collaboration? Because sometimes if the focus is on an interesting idea, let's say participatory budgeting, kind of interesting, there's actually a lot of conscious brokering. Who's interested to do this? Who's interested to fund this? Maybe this requires a tech platform, so we've got to talk to the tech people. Then we've got to bring every relevant expertise to the room and say, can you do this? Because if you say, anybody want to collaborate, then nothing happens. So then some kind of active brokerage feels like, to me, a productive thing to do. So the functions would be all this, and actually, these are some things we can do. But if you ask me, this is all the stuff. You don't have to read this. Let me tell you maybe the story to illustrate this. Let's say now, a couple of organizations are interested in educational equity. We all care about disadvantaged youth, children and youth, and they're not doing well in school, right? What if we are friends with NIE, Center for Research and Pedagogy and Practice, so NIE, CRPP, together with maybe some of the self-help groups that we've engaged before. They all say, yeah, we're kind of interested in this, and Shine works with the youth in the rental flats in Jalan Bukit Merah, and then there's Three Pumpkins. So we meet all these people and we say, you know, everyone's interested in a similar issue, but you might work in a different place. Maybe you can have the start of some kind of solutions-focused platform or network, right? Do you want to form this? Now, you form this, and of course, you can populate a page. You can all contribute what you know to a collective knowledge base so you understand it better. Maybe you understand school absenteeism, you understand the challenges, etc., etc. Now, there still leaves solutions. Solutions come from where? And actually, not a lot of people are looking at the solutions. We, together with NIE, CRPP, and some others, are looking at solutions, and we thought, you know, we always want to see if people are interested to try the solutions. So we would have a learning journey, or we would chat with the people interested in, let's say, peer-to-peer learning. Peer-to-peer learning is interesting to me because tuition is currently the solution to kids not doing well in school, and that's a market solution. And the self-help groups are subsidizing or, you know, finding volunteer tutors, but it's still fighting that game, right? Affluent parents can always find an edge up. They can always pay for that enrichment course, or that, you know, some people have even courses that get your kids through GEP or something like that. But peer-to-peer learning, if you can unlock the capacity of youth to teach and learn, or the community to teach and learn from one another, then you displace the need for this market solution. Others, we've looked at things such as democratic schools. So democratic education's kind of interesting. It's a bit radical in our context, but there's so many of its principles are interesting. This is where the children can sometimes self-define the curriculum. And so these are usually small schools made out of a community of 100 people, and the children are all mixed in their ages, and they teach and learn one another, and they learn whenever they want to. They feel like it. Today I'm going to learn math, tomorrow learn something else. And it fits the profile of learners who can't somehow quite follow a schedule. And sometimes it fits the high-performing kids, and sometimes it fits those with special needs. We've also, looking at that, we saw people who do things like a school within a school. So maybe our MOE schools are never going to get there anytime soon. Maybe the school within a school concept. We've talked to people who've done that. They'll get a group of people in the school who can't quite fit well within the school system. They form a democratic kind of school within a normal school. And maybe Head Foundation gets involved, etc. We think, well, actually, democratic schools kind of interesting. Do we want to write a policy brief, right, about maybe 20% of the curriculum could be done in, could be a democratic education, right? So there could be policy briefs, there could be concepts. There could be concepts like parent-led childcare, right? Basically, the schools have taken more and more of our, the role of raising our children, right? If it takes a village to raise a child, right? actually the schools have taken more and more of what the village is supposed to do, and the schools are bursting at the seams. And then there are all these ideas about how parents and the community can take charge. Parents could lead an after-school care or parent-led childcare. I would love it if I could take one day off a week and I'll take care of my own kid, but together with other kids. And we will hire a professional, but I'll be able to take one day off. I wouldn't be able to give up my career to take care of my kids, but I believe many parents will be able to sacrifice one day, not just my kids, but then I get to take care of my neighbor's kids together in a parent-led childcare model where we are supported by one professional. There's also interesting things like the educating neighborhood, whereby you activate the village, right? So you go around the neighborhood and say, who is interested to teach what? Or got a retired accountant interested in teaching accounting, got somebody interested to teach guitar, etc. You bring all this set of curriculum and skills and ask the kids, what do you want to learn from your neighbors? So there are all these things that you can bring to the network and people can consider, is this interesting enough? Do we want to do this? And when we do that, then we say, okay, what's required? Then we reach out and we broker with the right, maybe there's a funder that's required. Sometimes you don't need a funder. Maybe the tech people need to get involved to advise us. And then we can start incubating and testing for real. But that's the idea, right? That's the idea that you can still kind of correct for all the problems with collective solutions and mapping by kind of designing in a way whereby experts are involved, but community is involved with this kind of social design. But that's just my tentative thought. And I would be keen to hear what you think and what the panelists think. So maybe if there's a group, let's say you're self-mobilized, let's say your animal welfare group. Apparently the animal welfare group don't get along. Right, I've been told. But if you got along and you said, I want to come together to map out this area, show up, okay, maybe we'll pre-populate the animal welfare Google page or wiki page, and we'll do a wikithon with students because students are great for doing these things, right? Students have access to their libraries, and we usually find that if there's a knowledge mentor, a student paired up with a practitioner, we found that really works. So you do it together. The practitioners lend their ground knowledge, the students can access journal articles or whatever. And then we'll host a community network. And we say, okay, we found all this from our students populating this stuff. What did we miss and what did we get wrong? Tell us. Okay, then transparent about your ignorance, right? And then we can have a landscape report. Now, the funny thing about that is, how do you do the robustness of the report? A wiki page or a Google Doc will capture all sorts of diverse views. People will not agree with one another or anything. Or maybe the veracity of the information is not there. Well, that's okay, because you can leave that live and dynamic knowledge base for contribution, but every year or every other year, you can produce a landscape report that is verified, right? That's verified, and then that becomes, maybe disability landscape report 2025, and then maybe 2 years you do another one, or animal welfare landscape. And what about disagreements with values? My workaround is to capture that diversity of views. The report actually doesn't have to have one coherent view, right? People may agree or disagree with this. You just simply document that and put it there. And then you can know, well, there's a diversity of opinions. Why should any report have a coherent overall consensus position? It doesn't need to, right? Because the landscape report is to feed your own information and planning. So that's what we thought. And then maybe second year, we can do transit to solutioning mode, whereby all these ideas, now that we've talked about the issues and have a basic understanding of who are the other players and who's doing what, introduce new ideas to that and see if anybody wants to do something together. So there might be a community interest group if you want to dive deeper into an issue you feel you don't understand yet, or an action group if you already want to do something that you can do collectively. And then third year, exit to community, because we don't want to host this network forever, because if we are the hosts, we will be the bottleneck. If we don't do anything, then nothing happens. So there will be an intention that a community partner or a coalition of partners takes over the facilitation while we support that. So that's a possible process to work around all these issues of knowledge and contribution and coordination. And I just wondered what our distinguished panelists would think. And here I invite them up on stage. Natalie, Steve, Leonard, and Dominic. So we have Leonard, who's a senior director of Community Leadership and Partnerships at MVPC. Associate Natalie Pang, who's head of the Department of Comms and New Media and also Chief Librarian of NUS. We have Dominic Soon, co-founder of Better.sg. You've already met Louis Liu earlier, who's their new CEO. And Steve Lowe, Executive Director of the Lien Center for Social Innovation.
Natalie has slides, so we'll let her go first.
Thanks, Justin. So just
Hey, wait. Round of applause for our panelists first. Never welcome them. They feel like, oh, I come out and nobody cares. Okay, so you must earn your applause. That's what you're saying.
yeah, thanks. First of all, thanks, Justin, for shepherding us through such an exciting, I think, 30 minutes or so. Really always a pleasure to hear about ideas. As university librarian, I feel compelled to start by introducing some books. So right, but these books are significant, right? And it relates to the key talking points I'd like to share today, and also to respond to the proposed project by Justin. The first book is The Cult of the Amateur, right? Just a show of hands, how many of you have heard about this book? Okay, no hands, okay. It's a pretty dated book, right? It came out in 2007, and the reason why I wanted to highlight this book is because Andrew Keen, he's the author of this book. He's one of the sharpest critics I've ever read about participation, right? And he argues that, when this book came out, right, it was the mid-2000s. If you recall, everyone was excited about the democratic potential of the internet, right? There was YouTube that was very quickly gaining a lot of traction. Wikipedia, blogs, right, that were used by people who otherwise would not have access to media, right, to actually express their opinions and so on. In some cases, they were also using some of these collective platforms like Flickr, and some of these blogs, in fact, to come together for collective solutioning. So that was actually mid-2000s, right? So when Andrew Keen published this book, I think he was extremely skeptical, right? Of course, he was arguing that this here comes everybody participatory kind of internet scene essentially weakens what would have been actually professional knowledge, right? That were otherwise undertaken by journalists, experts, and so on. He also argued that this landscape will decline, right? We'll see certain decline, especially in terms of the quality of information, because information then lacked credibility, and there would be massive misinformation. Now, I think some of his predictions have come true, right? But I think his critiques were also very flawed, right? In the sense that I think he's assuming that experts have the best information, right, and knowledge. And I think my criticism of his arguments is also this, what I see as a very false dichotomy, right, between experts versus non-expert knowledge. Now, the second book I want to talk about, right, which also came out around the same time, which is why I drew it here for comparison. This book on expert knowledge, right, actually they were published by a couple of anthropologists, essentially to highlight how what they call first world people, right? This is actually a rather outdated term, but essentially it refers to capitalist, industrial, wealthy, and more developed nation as actually spearheading and leading what people regard as credible knowledge, right? And This book, to me, is significant in a number of ways because it challenges ideas about expertise. Who has expert knowledge, right? They also highlighted how a lot of indigenous knowledge, what we also call community knowledge, right? Knowledge that is practical, that comes from community, are often appropriate by experts who are not in the community themselves. So the book also kind of highlighted power dynamics of knowledge, right? And I think this is really how they also use this to draw sharp criticisms about the role of so-called experts in communities, right? And essentially, in doing so, argue that, I think Justin used the word expert mentors, right, or knowledge mentors, have this role in terms of facilitating but how knowledge comes together, how community comes together, but also argue that these people, these agents, right, working in the community also have very important ethical dilemmas they need to confront, including how they represent the communities that they work with, how they use indigenous knowledge that comes from community, and also how they balance public interests. So with that, right, I'd like to, I guess, highlight 3 questions for us to think about, and also I'll try to respond to some of Justin's points earlier. I think the first is really how can communities and experts come together to create impactful solutions. When I created these slides, I haven't seen Justin's slides, so this wasn't coordinated, but I think Justin already has sort of a process and a proposal for us. I think, Justin, you talked about practitioners as knowledge mentors and collective mapping, right, as part of the collective mapping process. I really agree with that because I think that coming together between the practitioners, acting as knowledge mentors, working together with students helps to kind of scaffold and also provide focus to what communities need to work on together. I think the challenge there is really how to give people a sense of agency. That brings me also to my second take, right? In all these collective projects, how do we overcome classic collective action problems, right? For instance, inaction, collective inaction, because people didn't think that their effort will make a difference. The tendency to free ride on each other efforts, especially when there are no incentives to differentiate their participation. I think one also inherent challenge is also trust, right? How do people trust each other to come together and not just share their knowledge, but also come together to create solutions? And when there is low trust, right, in each other, sometimes people result in choosing what could have been the worst possible outcomes, right? Something that is known as the prisoner's dilemma. And of course, in anything that's to do with a collective, there's also the public goods dilemma, right? Essentially, it's the question of who pays for what is commonly public and good to be shared by all, right? We can see this in issues such as water, even right now, transport, right? Who pays for fare hikes, for instance? So, I think this is something that I'll be very keen to hear more from other panelists in terms of how do we overcome these collective action problems, right? And Justin, you also talked about solutioning, right? And I just, and this is my last point, for me, solutions is not just something at the end, right? But solutions is also this thing at the end, right? Could be a product, could be a service, could be a new program. But solutions to me is also very much about the process and also about people as part of the solution. So I think, in terms of answering the first question, right, really, to me, the big question is how do we actually also let people come together? And I do believe that if we actually look at my first contrast, right, between these two books. It is actually, it can be about both, right? It can be about both experts, right, and also non-experts coming together, right? I don't like the word amateur here, so, but that's the title of Andrew Keen's book. So with that, thank you.
Thanks, Natalie. Maybe we can hear from the rest, maybe with Leonard first, because Leonard does a lot of engagement and partnerships with leaders as well as running collaborative networks.
All right, good afternoon, everyone. Thank you very much to the organizers and for Justin, right, for this invitation to be on this panel. Maybe a quick response to one of the questions or to the proposal that Justin had put up on the last slide. And I will just draw it a little bit from the insights from one of the initiatives that we run. It's called Collabs, and it was meant to be an approach, right, to address very complex, wicked problems. And the idea revolved around, putting the system in the room, right, getting the right people, which could be both experts as well as practitioners and so on. Service users, just getting everybody into that room, because it's nothing about us without us. And from there, it's a curated and facilitated conversation that will bring some level of alignment and some level of action. We've done about 7 runs over different topics, and there are a couple of key learnings that have come out over the years, right? We've covered topics from children and youth, seniors, people with disabilities, migrant workers, dementia, low-income families, and most recently, we're about on the tail end on fostering, and that was together with MSF. So we're really thinking about, okay, what's next? And really reflecting on the lessons that we've learned over the years. So one key thing that we learned very early on, painful lesson, but it was important, was about having the users in the room. Okay, so we addressed that and we brought that into the design. But in the nature of Collabs, we've kind of summarized it into 3 sort of phases, which is learn, align, and act. The learning part, okay, pretty good, right? You can get different experts, you get different views, you get the community in, you can kind of build it up pretty good to a pretty decent level. Alignment to a certain degree, right? It's not easy to try and bring everybody along on that same page. But the act piece, right? The action, right? The next steps, like actually moving the needle, that has been the biggest challenge thus far. And personally, very dissatisfied. I'm personally very dissatisfied with the results so far, and that's something that's very crucial for us in terms of how we review this. So to some of the ideas that Justin had mentioned, in the last slide about that collective process, I think one of the key things that we're learning is that there has to be some sort of issue owner, issue champion, or community partner that is in the conversation from the beginning, right? We cannot wait until you are 2-3 steps into the process, 2-3 months into the process, whatever the time period may be. We cannot wait for that because it dilutes the sense of ownership, it dilutes the sensibility, it dilutes the understanding. It just makes it very hard to be able to move into a space that allows a difference to be made. So that's one of the key reflections, just looking at what we had so far. I'm going to take a pause and then we can hear from other
we
members
can hear
as well.
from Steve, because Steve has actually done a lot of unmet needs reports from the Lian Center, and then looking at what you've done and this proposed model, what do you think, what's your own view of this way of doing things?
Thanks so much for the question, and thanks so much for having me. I was part of the Collabs, the low-income family Collabs. Was it 5 hours, 4 sessions?
A lot.
Yes. I remember it was somewhere about 20, 25 hours, and my attendance was 100%, by the way. So I was very much involved in that particular collab, and I thought it was wonderful. So a bit about what the Lian Center does. Our job is to do translative research. That is to say, we will only go out and get the data, get the evidence, get the information, if we can propose a solution and actually put some boots on the ground, pilot that solution, influence a policy, do something about the information that we are gathering. So the Collabs, to me, was a fantastic attempt, putting so many different players in the room, including social workers. Mine was a low-income family collapse. Social workers, practitioners, some government, and some end users. And for me as an observer, managed to learn a lot. Now, I think the question of collective intelligence, and so my context would be, say, for example, working with very low-income communities in Singapore and the region, and finding them solutions. Now, bear in mind, in some of these third world countries, some of the problems are systemic. The word is wicked, and everyone has tried everything. Foreign NGOs, professors, governments, so on and so forth. And so my KPI now is to solve the problem that nobody has solved in the last 2 centuries, right? One of the approaches that we love to take is what we call ABCD, Assets-Based Community Development. And you go into a community. Yes, you can do a study. Yes, you can understand the needs through an academic study, but nothing like asking the ground. And there are 3 aspects that's very important that we found. When you're doing a survey, doing a study, academic or otherwise, it's very important to see who is asking, how it's being asked, and what are we asking for. So I'll give you an example. There's a charity that works in the Philippines, and they did an impact study of some of their work that they did. And they of course, they hired a consultancy, which many people do, hired some surveyors. They went in, did the questions, and the results were sparkling. They were fantastic. They were so happy with the results. Of course, the funders happy with the results. But hand to heart, they said, this doesn't look right. This looks a little bit too good to be true. They redid the entire survey and used peers. They used people from the ground, people from the community, buddies, your neighbor, your friends. And now the interviewee could speak very frankly, and the results weren't so good. The impact measurement had actually changed. So I think as we do collective intelligence, I think we need to really look at the human side of it. And so we're currently doing a study on food insecurity in Singapore, the root causes, and I am very tempted to hire it out to a consultancy to do the surveys for me. We've got like, I don't know, 200 households, so there's a lot of work to do, but I'm trying to convince my team, just 6 of us now, because Han is not there anymore. Hi, Han. I'm trying to convince 6 of us we can do this, because it's so important to create the correct environment to really get the truth out, much like the collab. So credit to NVPC and the work that you did, so much hard work in terms of collecting that data. And just one more point, when we work with low incomes and the ABCD, assets-based community development, i.e. what's in the community that can help solve the problem already. Sometimes the biggest asset is actually passion, conviction, and ownership. That is, they believe that they can do something and you make them part of the process. So while we've talked a lot about collective intelligence today, about gathering data and the accuracy of the data, the powers that be and the actual outcomes, I find that the process of collective intelligence is very powerful if done correctly, because you empower the people that you're talking to, and then the dream is there's a joint ownership, conviction, and passion to solve the problem together. So I'm very much a fan of collective intelligence. I know it's got its problems, and academics may not be totally enthusiastic about it. But in terms of what we do with poverty alleviation, inequality, we have found it to be extremely helpful. So those are my thoughts.
Thanks, Steve. And last but not least, we have Dominic. And I invited Dominic because he's the tech guy, but that's false premises, because Better.sg actually manages thousands of tech volunteers. It's not the tech expertise that you just bring to the table, but also the ability to mobilize lots of people's talent and expertise. So we'd love to hear from you on both ends of that.
Thanks, Justin. So my name is Dominic. I'm one of the co-founders of Better.sg. It's a charity that was founded in 2020 with a very simple premise. We noticed that there were a lot of people out there with technology skills, and they're very excited to use that technology for some kind of public good. So since registering in 2020, we get about one sign up every day organically without any advertising, and now we have more than 2,000 volunteers that are signed up on our website. So what we do is that we put people together. This idea of a convener that we just talked about. We bring these people together. We encourage them to start their own projects, which has some kind of social cause in mind, or we would pair them with a nonprofit and use them and their skills to work through a particular technology problem. It can be something as simple as creating a website. It can be something as complex or as thinking through what is my cybersecurity stance. So some of the projects that we have done include things like we had a project called Call Home, where we had a group of volunteers to help foreign workers who are stuck in their dorms use the Wi-Fi and call the landlines back in their home country. So this was Bangladesh, so they couldn't, their family members didn't have internet access, but they had a landline that you could call. And so our volunteers built that app. We have one called To Be You, which is an interactive platform to understand the lives of minorities. And we have another one called schemes.sg, which is a search platform for finding the right government schemes to help you. I think there are a lot of points that was raised today that kind of resonated a lot. One of the things that we found is that there is a lot of desire to tap on the collective intelligence, but there needs to be a lot of structure put on top of that process. So what you find is that actually talent is unevenly distributed, even though the outcome even though the process involves a large group of people. In reality, for one particular question, not for all questions, but for one particular question, there's probably out of 100 people, there are 10 people that you can talk to who have the right answer. I think people, we were sort of joking at the table, like how was the dessert during lunch? If you ask two people, that's not collective intelligence. I think it is collective intelligence if you ask the two people who are the experts in dessert, right? But the question is, how do you find those two particular people out of the collective? And of course, every single project will have a series of questions. For dessert, these two people are the right people to ask. For something else, maybe building a website, these other two people are the right people. But you get a lot of value when you bring those two sets of people together and then you form that collective intelligence. So that spikiness is something that we have had to struggle with a lot, because a lot of the magic is really finding and curating the right set of volunteers who have the right set of skills and putting them together. And you can't do that. You can do that programmatically to a certain extent, but part of it is also sort of curation of individuals and understanding what their motivations are, what incentivizes them, and so on. So structure is one thing that is quite key. Maybe the second point I'll make is on the process that we just heard about, this idea of pairing students with experts and then creating some sort of solution and handing it to a community partner. That's something that we have done for quite a few of our projects. So, I would say this process is not, it's not a theoretical idea. It's something that we have done and it has worked. It doesn't work all the time, right? So it works when the conditions are right, when you have the right partner to take over a particular project. So our education, our interactive game for minorities, To Be You, was taken up by MOE. So that's finding the right partner for that solution. I think is absolutely key. But again, it requires a lot of curation and hand-holding to drive a positive outcome. Maybe just to emphasize this point a little bit more, earlier in the materials in the presentation, we talked about open source software as an example of how you can have collective wisdom that creates a constructive outcome. But who is the largest contributor to open source software? It's Microsoft, right? If you look at Linux, right, one of the largest owners of Linux, which is an open source operating system, was IBM. So if you think about examples of collective intelligence, oftentimes if you lift under the hood, there's a high degree of curation, there's a high degree of organization, and the magic of collective intelligence is how do we get people to participate wholly, freely, willingly, openly, in a manner where they are incentivized and they feel that they are part of the process, but at the same time, curate and organize this process in a way that may not be as organic as it may seem. Wikipedia is organized, it can be edited by anyone, but there's a whole system and hierarchy of who can make the big changes and who can improve those changes. So I think thinking about those structures is actually what we spend a lot of our focus on. Creating the magic of participation, at the same time having the discipline of process, because we always talk about success is a function of process and people, but the key thing for us is to make the process so smooth and so seamless, so that the right people show up, contribute the right answers to the particular questions that they are there for, where they can contribute the most, and then have those right people answer the right questions and eventually come to an outcome that is better than what any single person could have come up with. So I'll pause there.
Thanks, Dominic. Now I'm curious, who's the dessert influencer that's been going around? I would like to circle back to Natalie we were chatting informally about the role of the librarian, because you had explored the concept of all these things as a digital collection, and maybe the role that the librarians can play in this.
Yeah, I think actually when you say the word librarian, I think most people think of librarians as keepers of dusty old books. But to me, librarians actually have a very important role, somewhat political at times, right? They are actually under a lot of fire all the time. And I think what you asked me, what's the role of librarians, especially in the context of collective intelligence, right? I think it is about bringing connections together. It is about, the one of the most fundamental role that libraries have always played throughout the ages is the issue of access. Who has access, what they have access to, and in the context of even databases, knowledge being somewhat in contestation or conflicting, how do we actually resolve that, right? So the librarian role is not just about checking what's the false or falsehood here, or what are the facts, because sometimes that may not even be a relevant question at all. It's more about how do we actually bring a community together to deliberate based on what is common and also what is actually not so common. So I think, so in this context, right, actually to me, libraries play an even more important role, especially when, actually in current society, we have so many issues related to information problems, right? Issues that arise out of authenticity of information, source of information, where they come from, or even whether or not they are misinformation or disinformation campaigns, and also in terms of actually providing more equality, right, and also equity in providing access. So that will be my response.
I was wondering if you could specify the specific thing, if let's say there was really a network that was set up by SSAs and some nonprofits and some policymakers, and there was an interest to collectively populate an issue. What would you, of course, I'm not asking you to make any promises as a NUS chief librarian.
Have to be very careful,
but what would the library be able to do, kind of paint a concrete picture for us? Would you be looking at the wiki page and fact checking, or what specifically would be the value?
I think especially for VWOs and SSAs, one of the biggest challenges is the extent to which knowledge is somewhat fragmented, right? This means that some people know something. Maybe one or two people know everything, but they are not everywhere, right? So I think that will be maybe one role that libraries can play in terms of sort of pulling together, right? Just now I talked about public goods, right? To me, knowledge is a kind of public good. And in the context of collective intelligence, it's very important that we actually put this out there, put out actually good quality information so that people have a common basis to work on it, work on together. But yeah, of course, actually looking at sources, looking at the veracity of information, I think comes as part of that also.
You dare to say I will come and talk to you later, for sure. But the message is, I remember that you can do it, but need money. Okay, so that's the message we should remember. Steve, did you want to end on?
You can do it, but need money, right? So you not only do you need money, you need a philanthropist or funder that says to you, any data that you find, any best practices that you come to, any winning solutions that you may pilot and succeed in, you have to publish. And so I found that in my center at the Lian Center, the Lian Foundation was very clear, in almost to a point when they said, if you're not allowed to publish your findings, you're not allowed to take the contract. And I was like, oh no, there's really even more pressure for me to look for the correct funds. But I think it's so important. I think in the charity sector, as you alluded, which I've sat in for a couple of decades, there's a lot of pressure, even though it's a lovely space to be in, making that impact, there's a lot of pressure to get the funding. And if you've got a secret source, you don't always want to share it, even though you're particularly successful at, say, a program like Youth at Risk, for example, and you found a formula that works. You don't always want to tell all your charity friends about it because of that pressure. If I may give a few working insights to this, I think that can be discussed and should be discussed even at the board level. If we can come to a place where we say charity boards, and I know the Charity Council has a collaborative fund, and correct me if I'm wrong, but I think it's the least used fund at the moment. But the authorities at B are actually trying to get the charities to share information as much as possible, because in the end, we all want the same thing. And so I think it's definitely worth the effort. I think it's definitely, if you like, a very noble venture. We come to a repository of shared information for public good. And that's collective intelligence. But like you say, someone needs to fund it. Someone needs to be very convicted and persevere in this place and be a real advocate for it. Yeah, and that'll be very helpful for all of us, actually.
Thanks, Steve. Leonard, did you have any views on... I'm kind of trying to push for specificity, right? You don't have to commit to anything, but this is an exploratory conversation. What concretely might you want to do together is where I'm at, right? So that's, were you thinking of, moving forward with collabs and anything else that you want to do something together with anyone else here in the room? It's not a commitment, it's an exploration.
Yeah, as an exploration, certainly, to Steve's point, and thank you for the kind words, really appreciate it. It is really a collective effort, right, for all the players in the system to be able to contribute that way. I think the challenge that we face as well, right, when we operate in a system that is a little bit fragmented, and I think I had a side conversation with Dominic as well on that, and there is a bit of a tension between the sort of thousand flowers bloom vis-a-vis a very optimal, efficient charity ecosystem. And there are different forces at play, right? Clearly, funding mechanisms will create situations where agencies will behave in a certain way, will be motivated or incentivized to act in a certain way, and that's the really, really tough part. So certainly, if there's opportunity for us to work together for for a better outcome, right? Because if everybody is like Steve alluded, right? You have a particular solution that works for you, but it's very difficult to share because you will lose access to, or at least it's a perception, right? You will lose access to certain funding, or you kind of open it up to everybody. I think we have to go back to really some fundamentals, why did we start? Like, why are we here for? What is that sense of purpose? What is the difference we're trying to make? Because if it's okay, I'll be a bit blunt here. If it's only about our program, then there's something really at risk, right? If we're able to collectively work out, a shared agenda, a shared approach, a shared aspiration, a challenge statement that we can work on together. I think that will be the starting point, right? And then really it's a step-by-step piece. I'll make a comment about partnerships and something that's sort of re-emerging in some of the conversations that we're having more recently. And it's sort of the re-emergence of something very obvious, which is the relational component of this, right? And I'll break up the relational component into a few parts, right? One is having a deep understanding, right, of the motivations of your potential partners, right? That's one. Two is constantly communicate. And as you constantly communicate, I will also suggest suspending judgment, because miscommunication can happen anytime, all the time, and it's just a case of, can we pause for a moment before jumping to any conclusions, right? Communication lines need to be open. And the third point I would say in relation to the concept of relatability or relational aspects of partnerships is what Natalie mentioned earlier, which is trust. Yeah, cannot underestimate the value of having that, that aspect as we start to build collaborations and partnerships.
Thanks, Landon. And I think, if there was a network that was set up and if somebody decided to fund it, one simple mechanism would be the funder would require that everything that's produced in the network would be the knowledge commons, right? Every project that you do have to be published to the extent that isn't just a report, but the exact know-how and mechanics of how to do the programs is easily accessible to all so that anyone can run the same program they wanted to. There's a workaround. But I wondered, Dominic, if there were such a network, would you be able to advise? Because I assume that some might want to start and say, oh, we have a Google Doc, we can do that. Would somebody be able to advise on, no, that's a really terrible platform, try this one?
Yeah, maybe as a first point, if there's a charity that can collaborate with any other charity, it's better.sg because we are cause agnostic. So kind of almost by definition, I think we do best if we can work with other charities. But just on the question on the common resource and published knowledge, it's a epistemological question of what is knowledge, right? If I read something in a book, do I know it? And I think sometimes when we talk to charities and ideas, one of the ideas that some of the volunteers that come up with is, why don't we create a directory of resources, which is always the worst idea that anyone can come up with a directory, because nobody reads a directory, right? Because putting something online and on a page does not actually transfer the capability or provide any knowledge. So knowledge has to be done. And so I think when we come up with the question, what is the best platform to use? The first thing I encourage the volunteers to do is, why don't you meet this person face to face and understand what exactly the problem is? And so there was a situation where one charity came out to us and said that, we need sort of a youth metaverse platform, and what's the best way to create a youth metaverse platform, and after 2 hours conversation, you realize that what they really need is just a volunteer management system, right? Like that really fundamentally solves the issue that they have, which is that I cannot engage and keep track of my volunteers. So to answer the question, is there, how would the network solve this problem? I think it's through conversations. I will even go so far as to say that I think a requirement to provide knowledge and to document it is one part of it, but the commitment you should really give is time, right? Commit to giving your time to another charity who needs advice, and that will be worth 100 pages of any documentation that you can have.
Thanks, Dominic. Let's try and go into questions. We have one on the clarity of possible processes and the usage of students along with the knowledge mentors in facilitating collective intelligence is nice. However, how will we deal with the censorship in educational systems? Is there a censorship? How do we remain open when handling sensitive issues? Maybe as the NUS rep, the educational institution, you want to address first?
I think let me try and understand the motivation behind the question also. Rather than censorship, I'd like to think that actually when we discuss quote-unquote sensitive issues, right? there's a need for actually, I mean, it's always almost like balance, right, between privacy and also what is good to share, right? Well, in my own work with actually communities, I find that for those communities, they always experience privacy quite differently, right? It's not like how we experience privacy, right? Almost always they have to give a lot of information up front. So I think it behooves us as actually people who work in those communities, right, to handle such information very carefully, right? So I wouldn't call that censorship, right? But there is, I think at some point, a need to then look at what can be shared, what should not be shared. Because, I mean, sharing is important, right? I agree very much that as it's anything, in order for collective intelligence to work, there needs to be a collective, right? There needs to be collective sharing. But how we actually treat sensitive issues and information, it needs to be understood on the spectrum.
I'll just make a quick comment if you don't mind. It's a lesson drawn from one of the earlier panels today, and when we engage on topics that are perhaps sensitive, or more sensitive than others, right? At the onset, it's about having established norms, or for lack of a better term, house rules, or an agreement, right up front about how you want to be treated, how you want to share the information, how you like the information to be used, because then it at least sets the foundation for a more productive conversation. So I thought that was useful from earlier today.
I guess I was also reflecting that you could kind of tier the sensitive information. If you formed closed networks with Google Docs only accessible by your own organizations, sensitive stuff there is still kind of okay. But when you publish a report that is verified, maybe by the librarians and checked, then maybe then you frame the sensitive information, you anonymize it. So you could tier the kind of levels of access, I suppose.
Because if without actually that trust, that the information is going to be handled very sensitively, right? Pun not intended. People are not going to trust each other to be able to really come together and share and also create solutions together.
Do you have any questions that anybody wants to ask through the mic? Yes, please go ahead.
Hi, my name is Tony. I'm really very thankful for this conversation today because it highlights a lot of challenges that people face across broad areas. So it's less of a question and more of a suggestion. There's been a lot of excitement about this tool called open space technology. It's been used in the US and is popularized by the late Harrison Owen. In Singapore, we have some practitioners, and I think GovTech did open space technology about maybe 4 years ago. So I know the facilitators are still active in Singapore, and I just wondered, have you ever tried it? And what's your, basically, let me do a short introduction for people who don't know. Basically, it's like a marketplace of ideas. Anybody can propose a topic. All you need is a bulletin board, and you can have all your participants propose a topic they want to talk about, and the time and the venue. And anybody can go to any topic they see on the bulletin board. However, there are a few rules in place which gives it structure. First is the law of 2 feet. If you find yourself not learning or not contributing, then you can feel free to move to another topic based on bulletin board. So you don't have to stay where you don't feel engaged. I think that gives you permission to just, be quite pang-sang. We can just go where we want. And there's there are 4 guidelines. Whoever comes are the right people. When it ends, it ends. Whenever it starts, it's the right time. And when it's over, it's over. So I found it to be very liberating, and I thought you might be interested to hear about it, and just wondered, you can let me know if you want to explore it further. Thank you.
Thanks for that. I mean, I am a little familiar with it, and I suppose in the context of this, if there was a network coming together and open space technology supported the solutioning, I think that would be a great thing. And I was reflecting, I can't remember who said it, communities coming together, they don't necessarily have the best of ideas. So I think it's about bringing, like you said, the different partners can bring in their own strengths and assets. So if some of the people who are knowledge brokers can bring possible solutions to the table, then people don't necessarily have to ideate from scratch. And sometimes, it's the sense that having a curated set of solutions actually adds to people's sense of these are the things that might do together might be kind of interesting. Yeah, go ahead, Nat.
Just a quick response to that. I attended, in fact, a couple of conferences that was organized primarily on open space. So here are my observations. What I do enjoy is the law of two feet. It's actually a very nice idea. But the reality when the rubber hits the road, my own observations, is that firstly, I think it doesn't always take into account power dynamics. So when people propose an idea, right, quite often, depending on who's in the room, they look at, okay, who's proposing the idea? Am I on the equal ground to be in that same table, right? Be at the same table. So in fact, in one of the conferences, I ended up in this group exactly with the same people that was at my lunch group on day one, all talking about the same issue, right? There was no diversity, in fact, in the group. So I think even when we think about that, right, some anticipation of the challenges should come as well, right? For instance, how do we deal with representation and diversity? And what is actually, I think that actually an ideal balance to that problem will also be some kind of coordination. Because, and I think also, right, in open space, they assume that everyone's ready to participate on equal ground. But the practical reality is that is not always true, right? Sometimes people need a bit of preparation in order to participate on equal ground.
I just wanted to comment that one of our co-founders created a platform called dialectic.sg. And we have an ongoing project called Dialectic. I mean, it's a version 2 of dialectic.sg. That's precisely a platform that we can use for sort of debates and discussions. But I think the broader point again is that a lot of the times it's not a technology problem. It's who you bring to the table. So I think you have a better discussion with a curated set of individuals for a particular purpose around a table rather than using the best technology platform in the world for an uncurated set of folks. So I think, I mean, again, one of the interesting things about better.sg is that we start with a technology question. The solution is not always a technology solution. It's very much a process, an organizational or design solution.
That's really great. It sounds like a parting reflection that Dominic has done. So I would like to go for the rest for your parting reflections, then we'll call it a day. Oh, there's one more question. Hari.
No, the question was uploaded already, so I was wondering about that. So the main thing is, hi, my name is Terence, and I lived on Ubin for a little while, Pulau Ubin for a little while, and what I observed is, at the end of the day, if you want to make change, you have to live in. You have to stay there, you have to be there. I think that's what I appreciate about some of the efforts of Lian Foundation. Now, my question is, at the end of the day, the passion to make change is mostly if you live in the problem. For example, when you see the food deliverers rally together, Pink Dot, and so on, then action will happen, then change will happen. But everything is all decentralized today. Leadership is decentralized in HDB flats, and passion is so decentralized that amateurs, but all their passions are decentralized to their homes, to their phones, and so on. So how would you identify these passionate leaders to make some change?
Everyone's everywhere. How to identify leaders?
How do you identify the
leaders who can make the change?
How do you identify the leaders? Well, the beauty of collective intelligence is you don't have to identify the leader, although there will inevitably be one. So I think it's collective intelligence, but gathered with a lot of care. It's united with people with the same values. And you are right to say that it takes a significant effort if you want to affect change. And I do believe that living amongst the issues and the people and those facing the problems every day is your best form of collective intelligence. So like you say, sometimes the solution is to sit around a table. We found that very much in third world countries when we were trying to solve several issues in several communities. The most powerful data gathering point was at dinner. And for some reason, at dinner, there is a lot of honesty. Maybe you can't lie and eat at the same time. You might choke, I'm not sure. The other thing we discovered, and we found that after 9:30 p.m. in a particular region, a particular country, the men started getting very honest with some of the information, and without alcohol, by the way. And so we found that a very key data collection point. So my answer was that's how we identified leaders, actually, that would push forward that particular issue, push forward that particular cause through relationships. So collective intelligence is still foundationally strong, good relationships.
Thanks, Steve. Can I pull up my slides? Then we'll go to Natalie and then to Leonard for last thoughts, and then I'll round up. But can you pull up the slides in the meantime? Natalie, any parting reflections?
Actually, I wanted to respond to that, but maybe I'll just combine it with my reflection. I think the most important thing is actually trust and also conversation. One of the best stories I heard, and this was a couple of years ago when I was working with some SSAs on the International Day for the Eradication of Poverty, when the focus was on digital poverty. One of the best stories I heard was from one SSA who said that because they had actually several women leaders, right, in the community. So I asked, how did you identify them? And exactly that response, we didn't, right? It started with just the community, the SSA deciding to host potluck dinners and lunches and inviting some of these women to come together. And this sense that I can do something to make a difference to my community just emerged from those multiple makan sessions, right? So I think, yeah, when we talk about collective, I think whether or not it's intelligence, but to me, the most important thing is the collective, right? Whether or not intelligence is the output, right? I think that...
Even collective stupidity is fine, as long as it's collective.
It's a spectrum, right, sometimes. But to me, it's the people. It's the people and the mechanisms to bring the people together. Yeah.
Thank you. Last words.
Thank you, thank you. So, like, connecting back on this point about the collective and the strength of the collective lying in its relational aspects, you know, to Steve's point, and Terence, thank you for your question as well. When we're able to design intentionally certain conditions that allow for psychological safety and trust to be built, whether it's over a meal after 9:30 p.m., and it allows conversations to be more authentic, then there's a lot of power in that. And it's very serendipitous because one of our reviews for one of the programs talked about how do we get a better sense of the insights from certain service users, and it distilled into small group conversations around meals, and then just coming back together to consolidate the information. So it's a little bit collective intelligence in a way, but done in a very, again, intentional, relatable, respectful manner. So yeah, that would be my parting point.
Thanks, everybody. A round of applause for our panelists, please. And I will now announce the winners, but this one doesn't work. Let's see. Okay. This is what your experience was like. It's kind of like the competition, right? So the dodo bird suggested this was the race. The dodo bird drew lines to make a race course. It was like a circle. All you animals stood along, and then at 1, 2, 3, go, everybody started running. So I kind of felt that the experience just now was like this. And then you ran for half an hour and it was over. So then somebody asked, but who has won? So this is the answer, lah. Everybody has won and all must have prizes. And that's my offer to you. For every single issue or community asset page, there has a couple of people who's indicated that I'm interested in this issue. We will approach you, and if you can mobilize your own community, we will show up, we will help you structure the page. If you need us to facilitate a couple of networks, we'd be happy to do that. So that's your prize. And if you want to look at this, the power of organizing without organizations, and actually the subtitles are kind of interesting. Revolution doesn't happen when society adopts new technology, it happens when society adopts new behaviors. So the only question left for us is, are you ready? Thank you very much, everybody.